Good afternoon. I'm on Church Road, Knockbreda or Newtonbreda, whatever one you want to call it. And I'm looking up, this lane to me was always known as Purdy's Lane. But I'm looking up into Knockbreda Cemetery. And this is a fascinating cemetery. It was the church that all the graves were placed around is Knockbreda Parish Church, and it was consecrated in 1737. So that's basically whenever the cemetery started taking folk in. And the upper part of the cemetery, the older part of the cemetery is obviously based around the church building up at the top there. This cemetery is one of the oldest in the city. And do you know what? Because of its location, it is it was in the 1800s and 1700s. It was a very, very fashionable place to spend eternity. And that's why you've got people like Sir Charles Lanyon buried away up here at the top in amongst the mausoleum. And Knockbreda Parish Cemetery has got one of the finest collections of mausolei in the whole of Northern Ireland. Fantastic architectural graves. You just don't come across those very often. And they were put up by the great and the good. People who had spotted them in Calcutta and then decided, oh, I would like to live, I would like to my remains to be in a mausoleum like that. We've got also Samuel Nielsen, and he was a prominent United Irishman, and he was founder of the Northern Star newspaper. We've got Waddell Cunningham, and he gained his wealth through sugar plantations in the Caribbean, and unfortunately those plantations were to do with slavery, and an awful lot of top guys in Ulster made their money through slavery, and that's the way it was back then. The new cemetery contains about 26 Commonwealth War dead, and they have a special headstone. It's easy to recognise, but there's other war dead in here too. Just before I move on, I'll tell you the strange story of Alexander Corrie. And he's buried way up in the old graveyard. Now I've done a video of the old graveyard, but I missed out this. Alexander Corrie was only 25, and it was 1859. And he was a lathe worker. And unfortunately, he met his end, because he was wearing a neck handkerchief which caught in the lathe, and he was found strangled. Accidental death, only 25, 1859, and he's buried away up at the top there. So much history here, folks, and I'm going to take a wee walk through the cemetery, and if I see anything of interest and I can meet anybody of interest, I'll stop. So I'm just opposite Forest Side, and you can see it there in behind. And this is one of the main entrances to the cemetery, and blossom. Cherry blossoms out early. But there's another entrance further on down here, similar to this one, and then there's an entrance up by Knockbreda Parish Church up at the top. And then if you follow the tarmac, my bike's parked up in there. If you follow that tarmac on through, you have another entrance off the Saintfield Road. And there's the mention of Commonwealth War Graves. I think there's 26 of them in here. And my friend Billy and his grandson Joshua are finding those and cleaning them up. And you can see the great job that they've done with Winnie already. Before that, you know, you couldn't see any detail on that statue whatsoever. A wee girl who died at age 14. And they're now trying to find, you know, who Winnie was and a wee bit of historical detail about her. I think there's something like 6 or 7 thousand plots in here. Might be wrong on that, but I think so. And the whole place is divided up into sections. So I'm going to take a wee dander around. The lower end of the cemetery probably dates from 1900 on. I'm just looking up here, and this is the Turner Duff grave. Lord Murr of Belfast, 1923 to 29. And there's a war grave. Very distinctive. Don't know whether you can read that. I think this soldier was an MP. Love to see old Celtic crosses. Reverend William Hunter B.A., missionary of the Irish Presbyterian Church. He lived and laboured in Kuning, Manchuria, 38 years, and passed to rest 1929, aged 69. His works do follow him. It's not nice. A wee bit of Chinese up there too. You never know what you come across in here. And this is what the wind does. It knocks the headstone down, because it's weakened and weathered and such like. And this is another war grave. Commonwealth War Grave. Sergeant F.G. Williamson, Observer, Royal Air Force, 1940, aged 22. I've just come across this grave here. Yeah, Major George Thomas, is it Deace, D-E-A-C-E, Royal Irish Rifles, died October 1918. So this isn't a traditional, this is the family have erected this rather than the Commonwealth War Graves people. And here's another one for you folks. And I'm with I've bumped into my good friend Peter McCabe, who knows everything about all the graveyards in Belfast, and Peter is pointing out a few more interesting graves to me. Here's old Peter. Good man, Peter, and he's got books by the dozen written. Well, not quite, but how many have you got out? 2, and there's another one coming. What's it called?
2020.
2020, and that focuses on 20 graves from
in each of 20 different cemeteries, including Knockbreda.
And you've done a book on Dundonald Cemetery, and you've done a book on
City Cemetery.
The City Cemetery, and these are trails. So Peter is the man to go to if you want to know anything about Belfast graves, historical graves. If you've any trouble sleeping, he says, and he's a good guy. And just wandering around the graveyard, you never know what you come across. And here's an interesting grave. Loving memory of James Watson, died 27, and his son Ennis Hastings, who was lost on the SS Titanic. Now Ennis isn't buried here, but it's just a remembrance of him. Also his son, who died in active service in Salonika. That's Greece, 1917. This place is full of history. And Peter has kindly pointed out this interesting grave from the Belfast Blitz. 4 members of the same family, the Long family, killed together. Belfast Blitz. Absolutely shocking. Second World War, when the German bombers blitzed Belfast. Folks, Peter has just pointed out the difference a bit of soap and water over a period of time can make to a grave headstone. This gravestone hasn't been cleaned, obviously, and this one has soap and water. Absolutely pristine. Brilliant. And look at this. Linfield remembers Thomas Savage, killed in the Belfast Blitz, 1941. That's nice to remember, folks. And it's just wonderful coming across these graves. So many interesting grave headstones in here, but you have to look. You have to spend time. And this in the background here is the more common Commonwealth War Grave, as I have showed you earlier. And this is a family war grave. This is Brotherston, and this is Sergeant Brotherston, pilot, Royal Air Force, died 27-year-old, 1942. And this plaque is quite rare. It's known as a Recumbent Plaque. And I'm getting fed my information from Peter here, because I haven't a clue. But these are quite rare. So this is George Ferret, who was part of the famous Glentoran backline that won the Vienna Cup back in 1914. And look at this one. This is Samuel Stuart Murr, SS Murr. Anybody who lives in Belfast all those years ago remembers SS Murr's, and you bought anything to do with sport in his shop. Kits and all the rest of it. And he provided the kits for the Northern Ireland team at that time. SS Murr's. And Spence and Lennox brothers died on the Princess Victoria off the Copelands in the terrible boating tragedy in 1953, which is the year I was born. All those years ago. 133 souls were lost that day. And I'm just up towards the top half of the graveyard here, And it's a beautiful day. It has to be said, it's a beautiful day. We don't get these kinds of days too often this time of year. And there's one of the mausoleums I was telling you about, our mausoleums. I'm going to go into the old part of the graveyard. And some of the leading lights filling graves in Knockbreda Parish Church Cemetery are people like Waddell Cunningham, merchant; Robert Shipboy McAdam, there's a name, exported pumping machines; passionate champion of the Irish language, although he was Protestant. And here's the main man, Sir Charles Lanyon, responsible for, I don't know, so many of the buildings, prestigious buildings in Belfast. And here's another boy, Samuel Neilson, influential member of the Revolutionary Society of United Irishmen. And there's like so many United Irishmen leaders, they're all Protestant, they're all Presbyterians, and a lot of them were hung. And here we are in the graveyard. Someone said the niceties of social standing extended into the afterlife. So if you were a bigwig, if you were of the great and the good, then you might have chosen to be buried in Knockbreda Parish Church graveyard. And this graveyard is like an open air museum. It's got art, it's got sculpture, it's got ornate carvings, it's got history, all telling of a bygone age. And you know, walking round the graveyard, I am so surprised to see the inscriptions. Now normally whenever I go into a cemetery, you know, the older inscriptions are faded and you can't read them, but these ones actually are quite clear, and a lot of them date from the 1800s, and I just find this remarkable. And this graveyard, as you might have worked out, is remarkable for the mausoleum structures that it has. Here's a grave dating from 1811, and the earliest grave record that they have here is of someone who was buried in 1763. The church itself was consecrated, as I said, 1737. And here's some of the big mausoleums. Now here's a headstone, a Gothic style headstone that I am delighted to have found. This is the family burying place of Sir Charles Lanyon, and this is the burial place of the Girdwoods. And you can't read the inscription on there, but there's reference in one of the internet articles I was reading about one of them who died in 1900 at Mafeking, and another one who died in Cleardorp, South Africa in 1902, killed in action. The graveyard wasn't always like this. Most of these graves had railings around them. You see those railings in between here. Oh yes, this is the Martin grave. See the height of those graveyard railings. Those encompassed every grave. And unfortunately, someone in their wisdom several years ago decided to take all the railings down, and they also decided to knock down 2 of the mausoleum because they were in a bit of a dilapidated state. But the Follies Trust would have sorted that out, because they have done so with these remaining structures. This man was a captain, James McElroy, and he's lost at sea. February 1805. And she was the widow of Lieutenant William Swinney of the 90th Regiment of Foot. Died 1828, aged 44. And another one, Captain Jamie McElroy, who departed this life 1852. So there's military men, there's doctors, there's architects, there's policemen, there's merchants, there's well-to-do families all here, and there's also just normal, ordinary 9-to-5s like myself. A lot of, I'm noticing as I go round here, a lot of infant deaths recorded. And I like this headstone here. Let me read it to you. In memory of John Jordan McIntyre, by a few companions, as a mark of the esteem he was held in by them as a friend and brother, he was aged 18. Wonder what happened to him. Youthful reader, passing by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you will be, therefore prepare to follow me. And he's telling the reader to prepare to follow me. Now, if there is a God in heaven, well then you've got to prepare to meet him. If there's not, if we're all just arrived here by some big cosmic accident, then you have no worries. But it seems to me that if there's a watch, there has to be a watchmaker. If there's a world, there has to be a world maker. And to finish up, giving you a panorama of Belfast, this is Reverend James Murr, founder and for 55 years the faithful and beloved minister of Donegal Pass Presbyterian Church. Died 1924, aged 79. There you go. Come and see it for yourself, folks. Check it out. Don't sit at home. Don't stay at home. Get out there, enjoy the weather, and learn a wee bit about your forefathers.